And a huge thank you for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here at the Global Roundtable of Sustainable Beef because our industry has been taking quite a lot of knocks lately. And that's whether you're a scientist, a producer, a retailer, a processor, or even a consumer. And it's very easy to be critical, but it's much harder to actually act and find realistic, pragmatic solutions to the challenges. And in fact, I was just looking online now. There's actually released, the last couple of days, 2 more papers, one in Science and one in Nature Sustainability, talking about food issues, and I'm afraid, again, demonizing livestock production. And these papers are often based on global mean metrics and IPCC data. And of course, some of these are warranted comments about the issues around sustainability of livestock production systems. Some of them not so warranted, but as I say, it's very easy to be critical. And this is why I admire the Australian approach, and as an Englishman that's extremely difficult to say, but particularly CSIRO's approach, because when their new director, I think it's about 4 or 5 years, came in, one of the first things he did was actually remove a lot of the climate prediction scientists. And everyone said, oh, wow, CSIRO is going for a major change here. But actually what they were saying is, we know climate change is happening. What we need now is scientists to come with pragmatic solutions to climate change and changing the way that we produce our food. And I think that message was a real great one to put out. We're actually going to do something about it rather than just keep on saying it. And that's why I'm so delighted to get this invitation from Rory, because your group is doing something about it. It's looking at the sustainability of beef production, and we realise it's a vital food which has challenges, but it needs producers, retailers, scientists as well, we do have a role, but working with industry to come up with those solutions. So when Rory rang me up and asked if I would be to come today, I was absolutely delighted, of course, but I'd just actually given a keynote at the European Federation of Animal Science, where I've been working with some of the colleagues from INRA on sustainability metrics. And I thought this would be a good opportunity, actually, to share some of that data with you, because we've been thinking about how we actually put sustainability in the round. So some of the data which I'm going to present is actually from that paper, and I just want to thank some of my co-authors. Taro Takahashi, who's an agricultural economist, Graham McAuliffe is a PhD student of mine, and Homer Domingnes and Muriel Tichet from INRA, who we've been working with. But first of all, I want to give a little bit of a preamble. And if anyone's seen me speak before, you know, actually, I probably often give too much preamble, but please bear with me. So it's always good to start with what the challenges are. We all know these, and I've been so delighted today to hear so many of them back from the industry. You fully recognise this. But possibly the elephant in the room that you haven't identified is in the first one, increasing population, and I'll come on to that in a moment. But of course we have also increasing urbanisation, we have climate change. I was delighted to hear about soil health this morning, and of course demand for animal protein. And all of these have been put together as and said as being the biggest challenges facing the 21st century. And in fact, the former UK Chief Scientific Officer, Sir John Beddington, referred to these as the perfect storm of scenarios that is facing anthropogenic living on the planet, or mankind, and womankind, of course. So let's have a look at some of these in a little bit more detail. First, population growth. And this is the human population of the planet ticking along, and then, of course, agriculture comes into place and into phase, and we know how to produce food and stay in a single location. And this has got a huge increase in the human population. And it's the elephant in the room, guys. If we were looking at any other species on the planet doing what we're doing to the planet, we'd all be talking about culls rather than adjusting to how those species are living. But of course, we can't talk about culling human population, but it is the elephant in the room. The big issue that we face on the planet is that we have been, as a species, extremely successful. So what's going to happen to this biological species population? Well, any biologist knows that if you give a population of bacteria on a petri dish so many resources, eventually their population is going to hit plateau, and then it's going to decline. If we think of the Earth as our petri dish, and we are those bacteria, eventually we're going to hit plateau. We're certainly not going to carry on moving into the population. There's been some ridiculous predictions in terms of population of humans on the planet, but more realistic predictions are saying that we're going to hit plateau of between 10 and 11 billion people on the planet. And whichever one of these predictions you follow, even by 2050, which is not too far away in thinking, we're going to have, this 9 billion people on the planet to feed in a sustainable way. So population is a major issue. And of course, we know we haven't even got status quo. And I'm not talking about the 70s pop band. I'm talking about the fact that we have a changing climate. So the agriculture we know now, be that arable or livestock, might not necessarily be the agriculture we need in 10, 20, 30 years' time. Our food systems have relied on a few plant species. We have domesticated over 2,000 plant species, but we rely predominantly on 4. And the same could be said in terms of livestock. So possibly we need to think a little more out the box about the type of agriculture we need to develop in the future. The third major challenge, of course, is urbanisation, and this has a double whammy. I love this picture. It shows two things. It shows energy distribution on the planet, and of course it shows urbanisation. And urbanisation has a double whammy for sustainability. First and foremost, when people move to cities, they change how they consume. They become more westernised in their food choices, which is very good for beef producers, of course, because they will demand more animal-based protein. But, of course, that's going to need more resources. So that's the first one, and I think we can deal with that. The second one, which is the one that really, really troubles me, and this is the fact that more people who move into cities are moving away from rural communities. And if you think that the biggest challenge facing the 21st century is food production, we need the best brains, the best entrepreneurs, the best scientists as farmers. We need the most intelligent people on this planet producing food in sustainable ways. That's the biggest challenge. We need young people to see agriculture as sexy and want to become the next producers, retailers, manufacturers, producing food in a sustainable way, which is challenging and needs very intelligent, highly entrepreneurial people. And this brain drain away from rural communities, I think, is a real challenge to address that, to have the farming communities and futures of the future. So, urbanisation, a major challenge. Soil health, I was so glad actually this was mentioned, because a lot of the research that we do at Rothamsted Research is based on soil. In fact, we are 175 years old this year. We're the world's oldest agricultural research institute, and the vast majority of where we're known in the world is around about our soil experiments. We have some experiments that are in their 175th year looking at soil and understanding what makes a healthy soil. And it's complex. I'm glad that Tim is here, because I've heard him talk many, many times in animal science forums about the complexity of the rumen microbiota. Jesus, nothing when we get into the soil microbiota and understanding what drives healthy soil. And of course, it's not just biology, it's chemistry and it's physics. that drive a healthy soil. So we need to understand in its entirety and in its infinitesimal small amount what drives healthy soil. But that's not just at a scientific understanding, it's at a farmer level understanding. So we need to be able to produce the metrics scientifically and then translate them into easy-to-use farm interventions and farm metrics that can be measured to determine what that farm can do to improve their soil. And I could go into a lot about this slide, but I won't. But basically, this summarizes some of the research that we've been doing on our long-term experiments. So we've got bare fallow, arable and grassland soil here. And these are from the experiments of Rothamsted Research, which are in their 150th year. So we've got, this soil has been bare for 150 years, likewise and likewise. And then we've looked at some of the key physical properties of these soils which drive soil health. One of the critical ones is this decrit, which is all about pore space. And obviously you can see significantly higher on grassland soils. And this obviously will increase diffusion of nutrients. So this circle here shows diffusion of nutrients. But this is the physical properties. When you look at the biological properties, it becomes even more complex. Because actually, the biology seems to compensate some of the physics. Because you've got really poor pore space here, the bacteria in the soil are working significantly harder to actually mobilize nutrients because they haven't got this easy-to-move passive diffusion. So actually the biology in the soil, the bacteria in terms of gene abundance, is more highly productive here, particularly exoenzyme secretion, cell motility, anaerobic respiration, and anaerobic metabolism. Some of these are negative, obviously, particularly around anaerobic respiration, and some of them are positive. But what we need to do is to understand how we can get some of these genes turned on here so we get beneficial physics and biology working together. That's a big key area of science that we're working on within a program which I'll come on to later. The final challenge which I put, of course, is this increasing demand for meat, which we're all aware of. And this is it's an old data set now. I apologize, I should have updated it. It's from the FAO. The redder the country, the bigger the increase in meat consumption. And we know there's been this huge increase in demand, particularly in Asia. Actually, in terms of the UK and Europe, actually, it's plateaued. In terms of red meat, it's actually gone down. Beef and lamb has actually gone down, which is actually, I feel, is negative. But poultry meat during that time has seen a 356% increase. So that's why it's still red in this diagram. So why are we concerned about meat consumption and sustainability? Well, let's think about it from an equitable provision of resources and food in the population. Because basically that's what we strive for. For those 9 billion people on the planet, 7.5 billion now, we want to feed that population equitably. So let's do some assumptions. And Sarah earlier talked about a big pinch of salt. Well, I've got a truckload of salt coming in for some of my assumptions here. But bear with me, please. So if we think about the planet as it is now, and we want to feed every single person on that planet in the same way that we've just been fed in the restaurant here, a Western-style diet with a level of animal-based protein and all the food and resources that we freely have available in the West. So we want to feed everybody on a Western-style diet where we're pushing nearly 150 to 200 grams of protein per day. We would need, based on current resources, land use, no more deforestation, no improvement in agricultural systems. This is the truckload of salt coming in. But we would need an extra 1.5 planets to feed the whole population equitably on a Western-style diet. Okay? Now fast forward to 2050, and we want to feed that population equitably on a Western-style diet. We would need 5.5 extra planets based on current resources, land use, no more deforestation, etc. So I'm sure that we all want to think that every single person on the planet is equal. And therefore we want to move to a system that we can provide the same resources and opportunities to people on the planet. So therefore we've got to really think about how we consume, the responsible level of consumption, and whether livestock play a key role in that. I fervently believe they do, but we really need to think about responsible consumption levels. And then when we speak to consumers and with the industry, we're actually taking on board a lot of those levels that we believe is a responsible level of consumption. So the reason why ruminant products particularly have had a bad press, and we've heard about this a lot already, and I know you know this data, is that because of metrics of sustainability have been based on carbon, and particularly global warming potential. And when you look at carbon dioxide equivalents per kilogram of product, our ruminant industries do not stack up well, because predominantly of methane. We've heard a lot of things today, and we can have a lot of discussions around this, but this is the data which is banded around, and these are the papers of which are coming out. So looking at carbon, a single metric, against the kilogram of product. Why don't I think this is fair, and why I think we need other metrics to have a more balanced debate, is because, of course, a kilogram of product is very different in terms of the nutrients it contains. And I don't think we've had enough discussion around this. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I've done a lot of work on fatty acid profiles in animal products. So the first thing I did, and my group did then, was to have a look and say, okay, let's have a look at omega-3 and compare, and let's remove a kilogram of product, and let's compare actually provision of a vital nutrients, omega-3 fatty acids, from different animal-based sources. So that then gives it more in the round to compare different production systems and also the benefits of the key nutrients that animal-based products can provide. So that was a starting point. I then started to say, okay, well, let's have a look actually at replacing kilograms of meat with a gram of omega-3. And let's then compare these production systems. And you can see what here, and everyone knows, you know, there's been a lot of advocacy for forage-based systems, and we all know that they will produce higher levels of omega-3. And one of the interesting things, if you actually look at this metric, is you actually swap these two around. So this is concentrate-based system here, this is a forage-based system, and if you replace the kilogram of meat with grams of omega-3, actually this one becomes more unsustainable with this particular metric as opposed to a forage-based system. And actually the forage-based beef then becomes a lot more aligned with intensive pork than it does here. So you can see then you can get a different view using these different metrics. But of course that's just omega-3. And everybody knows if you want to take in omega-3, you eat oily fish. Not everybody likes to eat oily fish. So this is a contributor. But what we wanted to do then was say, okay, let's have a look at the key nutrients that we believe are the benefits of consuming animal-based products. That we know if you speak to human nutritionists that are going to be beneficial from consuming a moderate amount, a sustainable amount of animal-based protein. So actually looking at essential amino acids, MUFA, EPA, DHA, if you don't consume oily fish, calcium, iron, B vitamins, particularly riboflavin, folic acid, and vitamin B12, and some micronutrients, selenium and zinc. But of course you can't include those without also including some of the negative nutrients which come in from animal-based products. So we added in there sodium and saturated fatty acids. So then we looked at a whole range of animal-based livestock production systems, so beef, chicken, lamb, pork, and then compared concentrate or forage-produced, intensive or free-range for chicken, lowland lamb or upland lamb, and intensive pork. And this was based from UK data sets. So then we started to play around with this to see if we could get to more meaningful metrics of sustainability, taking into account the nutrients you get from animal products. So, we start to have a look first at the percentage RDI, so this is the recommended daily intake of these key nutrients, taking away the negative ones from different animal-based products. And everyone, big cheer in the room, beef performs best. Hey! And that's whether, thank you for the clap, thank my animals here. That's whether it's a concentrate-based system or a forage-based system, taking into account all those key nutrients which we identified the benefits of eating livestock products. Really great for RDI percentage, 100 gram of meat. So then we've got, and it beats chicken, it beats lamb, and it also beats pork. Because beef is highly nutrient dense. We're all aware of that. Okay, let's play around with some more metrics. So, this is the classical global warming potential metric which we're all aware of. This looks at carbon dioxide equivalents per 100 gram of meat. I've actually reduced it from kilogram to 100 gram of meat. And we know here that concentrate forage-based systems are poorly produced compared to monogastrics, particularly chicken and pork. So here the lowest value is the best because this is carbon dioxide equivalents per 100 gram of meat. So a lower value is better. So here chicken performs best. So in terms of RDI, beef performs best. In terms of carbon dioxide equivalents, chicken performs best. Fortunately, lamb performs pretty badly here. So then let's start to combining some of these metrics and make a comparison. So this is the classical, what I've just shown you, where if you're looking at the data from those papers in Nature, climate change, all of them are saying, you know, chicken is more sustainable than beef. But actually, if you look at carbon dioxide equivalents per delivery of key nutrients, actually beef performs better than chicken and lamb, because actually lamb produces high levels of emissions, and pork. So actually, in terms of carbon dioxide equivalents per nutrient delivery, this is one of the first data sets that actually showed that beef actually outperformed other livestock products, particularly monogastrics. But we didn't want to just stay there, because as I started this ramble, carbon is only one metric of sustainability. It's an important metric of sustainability, don't get me wrong, it's very important, and we want to reduce carbon as much as we can. But there are other aspects of sustainability which we need to include when we're comparing livestock production systems. Because if carbon was the sole metric, there is many things we would not do. We would not fly planes. We would not drive cars. And I'm sorry, we would not farm ruminants. But we do, because carbon is important, but it is not the only important metric. So what we looked at now was actually the amount of land taken to produce that food. But we said the land that is important in this analysis is land that can be used to produce food. So we looked at arable land use. And this is where other metrics, when you're looking at land use, can again demonize ruminant production. But the critical thing here is actually usable land. Land which can be used for growing food, not being fed to ruminants. So we looked at arable land use per 100 grams of meat. And this is the arable land use. So you can see, actually, this is where the forage-based system outcompetes the concentrate system, obviously. All beat chicken, because it's using all arable land. All beat pork. This is the disadvantage of monogastrics. But here, lamb performs extremely well, particularly, actually lowland lamb, actually, in terms of its performance. So on this particular metric, in terms of arable land use, lamb is the most sustainable meat. So then if you start to combine some of these again, you look at arable land use here, and we look at arable land use for providing the nutrients for humans. So it's metre squared to provide 1% of the RDI. And again, if you look here, our ruminants perform well, lamb actually performs, but there's not much difference to beef, and our monogastric friends, chicken and pork, fare less favourably. And you've got to agree, land use, because we're not going to get any more land, we don't want to cut down any more forests, land use is a critical metric. and it's one that we need to use in our debate around sustainability. Critically, the benefit in terms of lower arable land use for producing high nutrients. Okay, so that was an exercise that I performed in my group, and we got some good data and we got some papers out. And then I was discussing with some French colleagues who have got some really, really detailed assessments of France based on regions, discrete regions of France, which have detailed analysis of the livestock that they contain. So basically, excuse my French for all my French colleagues, the Petite Région Agricole, good? So France is basically split into 571 regions, these PRAs. And within each of these PRAs, you can have a look at the livestock that are produced within that PRA. So using the new metrics we developed, we analysed this huge French data set to have a look at how these different PRAs act in terms of sustainability. So we took our numerical assessment and we applied it to a huge data set, so upscaling it to France. We wanted to test the hypothesis that ruminants can provide more nutrients for humans per hectare of arable land than monogastrics. So quite an out there hypothesis, but we really wanted to test that. So we looked at ruminant share in each of these regions from 0 to 1. So a ruminant share of 0 means in that region there was no ruminants. It was all monogastrics. Okay? A ruminant share of 1 in those regions means there's 100% ruminants of the livestock within that region. We looked at the nutrients provided from all livestock products, so be it meat, milk, and eggs. We used global warming potential based on the life cycle assessment, classical IPCC. And we looked at arable land use, including displaced land. So if they were buying in feed, we included the arable land use for the exporters. I'm sorry, that T-Shay 1645 today was from the European Federation when I first presented this, and I forgot to remove it. So that presentation isn't happening, or hasn't happened. So let's have a look at some of these maps. And you can see what I mean now by these PRAs. So this is France and each one of the regions, 571 of them, split up, and each of them looking at key metrics. So here, this is the nutrient delivery per region from livestock. So this is the nutrient index. And you can see the redder areas, the higher amount of nutrients from livestock provided by that area. So for all the French people in the room, they realise, yes, that's obvious. This particular area of France, Normandy and Brittany, have a very high livestock concentration, and so therefore they provide a lot of nutrients from livestock. If you look at the global warming potential then from these regions, it's not surprising that the ones that have the most nutrients from livestock also produce the most emissions. So this is the global warming potential from livestock in carbon dioxide equivalents per PRA, per each of these regions. Okay, so nothing surprising about that. We then looked at the arable land use for livestock, including displacement. So this, again, not surprising. The areas of France that had the most livestock also used the most arable land to feed those livestock. Okay, so this is the background analysis to set up the key criteria. But then what we did, and this is where it becomes really interesting. Oh, I think it's interesting anyway, but I'm quite sad. So this again is the way I'll explain these figures for you now. So this is the ruminant share. So each one of these dots is one of those 571 regions of France. Okay. So 0 basically means there was no ruminant in that region, and obviously there's not many of them, but there's a lot of regions that had 100% ruminants, okay? And this is the nutrient index per arable land use in people per hectare. So the higher the number, the more nutrients you're providing per arable land use, per hectare of arable land from livestock. So, these guys here are doing a fantastic job. They are feeding lots of people very high nutrients using only a hectare of arable land. These guys are doing a poor job. Okay? Now, there's a wide distribution here, but you can see, actually, including ruminants within the sector, significantly improves this story. But note, there's a lot of work to be done, and there's a huge spread. Okay, we took it the next step. We said, okay, what about carbon dioxide? So this is, again, same way along here. So no ruminants in this area of France, 100% ruminants area of France. This is the nutrient index per global warming potential. So that's the people fed and tons of carbon dioxide equivalents to feed those people. And this is interesting, because we've heard a lot about global warming potential and the negative effect of ruminants, but actually here in this slide we're showing that these guys, which are 100% ruminants, are feeding a lot of people for the same tons of carbon dioxide. So what's happened is the monogastric regions have improved because there's low carbon dioxide equivalents. But ruminant regions have kept up because of the high nutrient density of the animal-based products. So because of the high nutrient density, the ruminant share does better than expected. Okay, so we continued to mine this data set because I was particularly interested now. And it showed that there's a wide variation in terms of the ruminants. And there was actually a bimodal distribution in extensive regions of France. You know, they could either be pretty bad or could be really good and compete with monogastrics in terms of providing nutrients. So we looked into this data a little bit more. And we said, okay, what is it about the good producers? So would the nutrient index per arable land use match up with the nutrient index per global warming potential? In other questions, were good producers always good producers? Were good producers good because they used not much arable land, but they also didn't produce much carbon dioxide? So we took the best producers here, and then we took dot for dot those producers which were good in terms of nutrient index per arable land use over to the next slide. Same. So if these producers which are good at utilizing resources, not using much arable land, were also good at reducing emissions. Something you all know, guys. Good farmers are good farmers in terms of efficiency. But this is a real good data set to prove that at a region level. And we then were particularly interested in these three farms. I was hoping there'd be beef farms for this audience, but they were actually dairy farms. But they are really, really efficient dairy farms, not using much arable land and producing very high amount of products. But just to note, we've got a lot of work to do because these guys are pretty poor, but there's a lot of guys that are doing so well. So, what is sustainability? And it's a difficult one. And it's a complex region. And it's a complex message. And using one single metric, carbon dioxide equivalents per kilogram of product, is not the way to go. So we need to think about how we combine these different metrics of sustainability driven by nutrient use provision and global warming potential and arable land use into something which gives more pragmatic use and the potential and the future role and position of livestock in terms of sustainability. Because if you use different metrics, you'll get very different answers. Now, the whole of the scientific debate could have been focused on land use, and we'd all be here with a big pat on our back from the next Nature and Science paper, because as ruminant producers were really, really great. And it would be the poultry producers that are getting it in the neck. But because carbon has been the chosen metric, of course, that is why we're getting it in the neck. But we need to work together collectively. But of course, and critically, and this is why I'm so passionate about livestock science, is because, and we've already heard it from the tannery industry and the leather industry, livestock are so much more than just food. They are critical components of food, but they give so much more to us than just high-quality nutrition. They are aesthetically pleasing. I'm sure you'll all agree. It's a picture in Scotland. Isn't that so much more a beautiful picture because of the animals in that, rather than just the scenery? I certainly think it is. Working with many, many people around the world where they do not have access to tractors and engineering machinery, livestock still play a critical component of draft. We also, and I was delighted to hear that the leather presentation, Jesus, we need to rediscover animal-based fibres and products. We need to remove plastics. I was amazed to see a whole group demonising livestock products which are sustainable in terms of providing fibre. And if they're doing that, you're pushing everyone towards polymers and plastics and polythene. Oh, anyway. Non-sustainable resource. We need to rediscover the fantastic animal fibres that many countries and parts of the world are. And of course, animal-based products are everywhere. And so they should be. I think I'm always fascinated when I go to abattoirs and talk to the industry and think about how they're using every component of that animal. Not a bit is wasted. It is going into so many different industries, a real sustainable aspect of animal products. It is not just about meat, and it's not just about leather. There are many, many, many other aspects. In fact, I'm working with a company at the moment that is converting gut material and bones into a real sustainable fertilizer, phosphorus-rich fertilizer, so we don't have to continually mine Morocco for cadmium-rich phosphorus. We have got cadmium-free phosphorus in animal bones. We need to rediscover it. Great potential. And of course, I love having discussions with vegans about this, but anyway, I'll move on. Although it was really fascinating to find out that vegans can no longer consume broccoli, cherries, avocados, and a whole load of plant-based animals because they use bees inappropriately for fertilization purposes. So next time you see a vegan eating an avocado, can you say, actually, that was fertilized using bees inappropriately. You're disgusting me. Put that avocado away. So I think there's lots of debate around that, and there's a lot of misunderstanding. And of course, vitally, when he talked about soil health, fertilizers, returning of nutrients back to soils, the vital role that animals play in turning and soil organic matter. Shown clearly on those experiments from 150-year-old, the benefits of grassland soils, soil fertility. Arable farmers need livestock farmers now more than ever. And in fact, one of the real pleasures I'm seeing within the UK is the rise of flying flocks, bringing in sheep into arable farms to bring back soil health. Now, we need an output for those animals, and therefore we need to include them as part of mixed farming systems. And that is the future of sustainability, guys, arable and livestock systems. And of course, in many parts of the world, fuel pats are dried and used as fuel. But this is my favourite photo, and I'm sorry it's goats, but actually I love goats, so I'm not going to apologise. This farmer actually referred to these animals here as his bio-ATM. He didn't have a bank account. Any time he needed to mobilise resources, he sold a goat. So his wealth, his entire wealth, was tied up in these robust, resilient animals here. And I'm sorry to say, guys, actually, small ruminants have a critical role to play in sustainable livestock systems, particularly in parts of Africa and Asia. And I really, really do advocate small ruminants, particularly goats and sheep, as well as beef, but particularly in these animals. So, I've got 2 more slides, Roy. I've got a little bit of time, but I'm going to wrap this up before mentioning 2 research projects that I'd like you to be aware of. So, livestock are part of the solution for sustainable global food security. I think we all agree on that. But great care must be given when developing the metrics when determining their role. Otherwise, we get the wrong message. And we all need to work together around that. So I just wanted to talk about very briefly two programs of research which we're doing at Rothamsted and more globally, which I think are really aligned to what the Global Roundtable of Sustainable Beef is trying to achieve. So the first one is a program which I lead. It's all about soil to nutrition. And it's driven by the fact that sustainability is advocated in farm systems by the transfer, the efficient transfer. If we think of what farming is, it's the efficient transfer of nutrients from soil into food. Ultimately, that's what it is. So what are the biological, chemical and physical processes which will improve the efficiency of that movement of nutrients from the soil into food? And this is a big program. It's an £8.5 million program which we got from the UK government to really understand key processes driving soil efficiency, transfer of nutrients here. Then what interventions that need to be played out on farm to optimize the potential of this better understanding of the flow of nutrients, what interventions are needed, and then scaling up, as I did with France, but scaling up, and sorry, Will, we've cut off Scotland here, scaling up to see what the impact would be at a landscape scale. So it's a project I want you to be aware of. All the data will be freely accessible, so please, if you're interested in hearing more about that, come and grab me later. And the final one, which I just want to end on, is that, my background, my family are Irish. I was brought up on a dairy farm in County Kerry, and I know grassland systems. But when I think about sustainable livestock production systems, it's not just grassland, and we can't just deliver sustainability from temperate grassland systems. We need to think about all different ruminant production systems, whether they be prairie grasslands, whether they be dry lands within Australia, whether they be tropical systems in India, or whether they be steppes grazing systems in Inner Mongolia. So 4 years ago, we started this Global Farm Platform initiative, which brings scientists and research farms together to look at these metrics of sustainability. So far, we've got 15 farms signed up from around the world to really address aspects of sustainability and work together. So again, if you're interested in to know what we're doing, then the website address is there. Rory, I hope you don't mind just me talking about those last two. And with that, I conclude. Thank you.